Managing kids in kids' church doesn't have to be hard. You just have to have a plan that works. That's why what I'm about to give you in this video is a discipline plan that works. Hey everybody, we're so glad that you have joined this video and here to watch, and especially if you are new to children's ministry, you've been in it for a while, and you just have misbehaving kids, you're just trying to figure out how do we get them under control? How do we make sure that they are paying attention, that they're listening, that they're not distracting others? These are all questions that we have to answer for ourselves. So before I jump in and dive into the content, make sure you like, follow, subscribe, hit that notification button so you don't miss any one of these videos as we put them out. Also, make sure to follow me on my blog at davidrenaud.blogspot.com. So when my very first children's ministry, one of the first things I did, and I've done this at every church I've been to since, is that before I went in and started doing everything and making things happen, is that I went in and I watched to see how they did their service. How does the service run and how does it work? So this is my first children's ministry. I had worked in this children's ministry before, but I'd been gone for a few years and college students had taken it over. Now these college students were full of life and energy and heart and passion for children's ministry, and they were doing an incredible job with the games and with the stories and with the worship. But they had one major problem: discipline. The kids were going crazy. They were getting up, they were walking around, they were yelling, they weren't staying within their seats, they were on top of each other. And when I started looking around, they also had these weird little cards that they kept underneath their chairs, and there were 3 of them. And sometimes after a kid had misbehaved a ton, one of the leaders would ask the kid for their card, but then the behavior of the kid would never actually change. And so when the service was over, I asked him, so what is the story with the cards? Why were the kids going crazy? And he said, oh, that's our discipline system. What we do is we have a 3 structure out. And so if you get all 3 of the you get all 3 cards when you first come in. And each time you misbehave, we take away a card. But we take away a card. And then when they lose all their cards, they don't get any candy. So then I asked, okay, so what happens if you never lose a card? And I said, well, then you get 3 pieces of candy. I'm like, awesome. What happens if you lose 1 card? Well, then you get 2. What happens if you lose 1 card? Well, then what happens if you lose 2 cards? Well, then you only get 1 piece of candy. So what was happening is that the kids were misbehaving all they wanted because the consequences wasn't enough for them to feel it. Any kid could figure out this system and exploit it because it wasn't every time that the kid misbehaved, they had to get warning, and then take away the card. And now the kid's only down 1 piece of candy. So instead of getting 3 pieces of candy, I get 2 pieces of candy. That's a deal. When I was a kid, I would take every single day. And that's exactly what happened here. So one of the first things I changed when I came into my children's ministry was the rules and consequences. Now, a little bit about me. My degree is in education, specifically to teach high school math, but I was still in all the classroom management classes that all the other teachers were in. And I spent many, many hours in classroom management and how to set rules and consequences and expectations. And I was fresh out of college when I was taking over this ministry. So I was like, okay, let's take some of these classroom management rules and let's put them in place at this ministry and see how it works. And I will tell you, I've been doing children's ministry now for 12 plus years, and this plan just works. It works every single time. And I've used it over and over and over again, and with very little variation on it because it works for the kids. So here's some of the rules and consequences that I use in my children's ministry to manage the kids. Now, before we get into that first rule, what I want to talk about is the format of your rules. What I do for my rules is I try to make them as generic as possible. Now, I don't want to be so vague that they don't know what to do, but I don't want to be so hyper specific that I end up with a mile-long list of rules. So, for example, instead of saying don't go on the stage, I say stay in your seat unless you have permission to do otherwise. Because what happens is if I tell them stay in your seat unless you have permission to do otherwise, then they're not going to go on the stage because they have to get permission, and I'm not going to give them permission to go on stage. And also, they're going to stay in their seat, because if my only rule is don't go on the stage, well, then that means I can just get up and go get water. I can get up and go to the bathroom. I can get up and go sit next to my friend. I can do all of those things without permission or without telling us what's going on, and it's a distraction to everyone else. So we make a far more generic rule that says stay in your seat unless you have permission to do otherwise. So as I go through these rules, what I'm actually going to show you is a video that I play in children's ministry, and I'll talk more about that at the end of this video of how I use it and where I use it. But this is just to help you understand which each one of the rules are and how I convey it to the children.
Hello, my name is Jacques the French Poodle.
And my name's Booger.
Hello, Booger.
Hello, Jacques.
We are here today to do the things for you called the rules and consequences.
And for those of you who don't speak French, that means we're going to do the rules.
Yeah. Rule number 1.
What is rule number 1?
Follow directions the first time they are given.
Follow directions the first time they are given. I stole this directly from a classroom management book that I was studying. Unfortunately, I don't remember what it is, but I will put it down in the comments. And it had like a list of 5 rules. And the first one was follow directions the first time they are given. The great part about this rule is that it covers everything. Because if I don't want kids to do something, I don't want them to climb up on something. I don't want them to, I have these weird like rope bands that's kind of like a banister so kids don't like fall over the edge because I have stadium seating, and like kids like to play it like a guitar. So I say, hey, don't mess with the bands. I don't have to make a rule about it. I just give them directions. Don't mess with the bands. And then, hey, it's covered. I don't have to have this huge list. And that follow directions the first time they're given really helps cover a whole multitude of rules because it's generic. And I get to determine what's a rule and what's not because I get to say, hey, do this. Hey, don't do that. The second rule is.
All right. Rule number 2. Raise your hand and wait for permission to speak. Don't speak out or interrupt when a leader is talking.
Yeah, don't do it. It's not good for you.
It's not.
Not good at all.
That's right. Raise your hand and wait for permission to speak. Don't speak out when a leader is talking. So what we try to do with this one is that in every classroom that a kid has ever been in, they have to raise their hand and wait for permission to speak. And so we're just carrying this over into children's church. The kids need an outlet for them to express themselves, to ask questions, to make a comment, and they need a place to do that. Because if you don't tell them, raise your hand and wait for permission to speak, what's going to end up happening is they're just going to yell it out. Or they're going to hold it inside and then just unload on you at the end. And neither one of those are good. So what we have to do is we have to say, hey, raise your hand and wait for permission to speak. The other thing that happens, and if you've been in children's ministry or working with kids at any time, what happens, and this even happens with adults now that I think about it, is that we turn and we talk to someone else. Now, just a comment here and there is not a big deal. But if it becomes like a full-on conversation, a distraction to others, hey, raise your hand and wait for permission to speak. Don't speak out when a leader is talking. That's the rule. We don't want you talking while the leader up here is talking. It's about respect. It's about honoring the presentation, and they're going to pay more attention when they're going to pay more attention when they're quiet and listening to what's going on. The third rule is
rule number 3. Stay in your seat unless you have permission to speak or get up.
That's not what the rule says.
Oui.
I think it says,
stay in your seat unless you have permission to do otherwise.
That's what I said, girly girl.
Whatever.
That's right. Stay in your seat unless you have permission to do otherwise. Now, I already covered this one a little bit, talking about where the kids can go and what they're doing and why they're doing this. I will say that for the most part, this rule doesn't get broken a lot, but I will say that in my first church I was in, we had individual chairs, and that was really where I set up this rule. And it was a whole lot easier to enforce this rule because they were individual chairs. My first and second church had that. My third church, we have stadium seating, and they all sit on benches. And so this rule is a lot harder to enforce because they keep moving, because there's no like one defined area. Even in the COVID era, even though they're supposed to be social distance and I divvied out the thing, they still kind of like there's a lot of wiggle room there. So, but we still have the rule because I don't want them like getting up. I don't want them like jumping down the stairs. I don't want them moving all the way across the room. So it still works, but there's a little bit more leeway, a little bit more play with this as there was at my previous 2 churches where we had individual chairs. The 4th rule is this.
The next rule is keep hands, feet, and other objects to yourself.
I don't have any hands.
Oh, I do. And feet.
Oh, I have them too. I have ears. I have very nice ears. You want to pet me?
What's the next rule?
You want to pet me?
No.
Oh.
Keep hands, feet, and other objects to yourself. Now, this rule, I don't really have to enforce that often. This doesn't happen a lot where kids are like touching one another, or they're like, hey, look at my feet, or like I've joked about when I've talked about these rules that a kid takes a flip-flop off and smacks the other kid. That doesn't actually happen all that often, but it is still nice to have this rule in the books just in case like a fight breaks out, or everyone's quiet and everyone's staying in their seat and all that, but then there's still this kid like, hey, I'm not touching you. Yeah, it happens. And so this rule helps contain that, and it is really helpful when you actually need it. The 5th and final rule is
no bad language or teasing.
Oh, that's a very good rule.
Oui, oui.
That's a very good rule.
Oui, oui.
People, oui, oui. That's weird.
It means yes, yes.
So
in French.
So
no bad language or teasing. Now, if you work in more of an inner city type place, or a place where the kids come from a little rougher background, you're going to run into this bad language. I have not worked in that area. And when I was at my first church, that was more of an inner city thing. And so I did have bad language being used that often, but really I don't run into that a lot. And my previous 2 churches were far more suburban. We're far more, the kids are far more, I'm in the Bible Belt. My second church was in Montgomery, Alabama. So there just wasn't a lot of like bad language, but teasing is a thing. And I don't want to call this bullying, because teasing happens before bullying. And what we want to, and kids can be super mean to each other, even if they're friends. And so what we want to do is we want to say, hey, we don't make fun of other people. We don't laugh at other people just because they do something weird. Now, this definitely plays into account when you have kids with special needs that are part of your ministry. I've never had a special needs ministry as a part of my church. I did have it at the church I'm at now, but it was very minor and very small. And so I still had kids who have autism or in a wheelchair or other things have come into the ministry. And let's just face it, sometimes these special need kids, they say funny things, they do weird things, and they do things that kids want to comment on or laugh at or be critical of. And so this rule helps us to like, hey, let's not do that. No bad language or teasing. Let's not make fun of them, because for the most part, that kid can't help it. And so it's just not nice. It's not Christ-like to make fun of other people. That's why we say no bad language or teasing. So those are my 5 rules. I try to keep it short. I try to keep it simple. Some churches I know have gone all the way down to 3 rules or even 1 rule. I feel like that's too few. And there's other churches that have like 10 rules. And it's like, then again, that's too many. That 5 is really a good place. 3 to 5 is where you want to be in your rules. And like I said, you want to be generic, that kind of covers all of the behaviors and the expectations of what you want to do. Now, here's the thing with the rules, is that rules are great, but unless there's consequences, unless there's a way to enforce those rules, they're just words on a paper. They're not actually going to accomplish anything. And that was really the problem that the students had in the story I told at the beginning, is that they didn't have, their consequences weren't heavy enough. The kids didn't feel it. So when I make these rules, when I make the consequences, they all have to be, gradually increase in the consequence. It has to be worse each time you have an infraction. So here are my consequences. Here's the first one.
Okay. So, on to the consequences. First consequence, you will be warned.
You have all and will be warned.
A warning. A warning is super simple. And a lot of times, I'm not like a warning is like, oh, you didn't spoke out. Here's a warning. I don't do that. It's far more grace-filled. And sometimes the kids just needs a little bit of a reminder. But if it's a continual infraction, then I'll say, hey, this is your warning. And that's usually enough to snap the kid out of it and realize, oh, I'm not doing what's expected. I need to act accordingly. I need to follow the rules that have been laid out because, our kids need grace. And so we're going to give them grace with a warning. The second consequence is
Second offense. Move to another location.
You will be moved to another location.
you will be moved to another location. A lot of times a kid's misbehavior is not that kid isolated in that one spot. Most of the time what happens is the kid is having a conversation or talking to one of their friends, talking to someone. It's 2 or 3 kids that they're either touching each other or they're talking or they're just not paying attention and they're being a distraction to each other. So one of the best things I do, and I got this from the classroom management book, is you just move them. So you don't have to go as drastically as like, hey, you're sitting on the boys' side, now you got to go to the girls' side or vice versa. And you don't have to go like, sometimes just moving them like, hey, I need you to go from this row to this row. You were in the back row. Now I want you to move 2 rows up. So it just adding that separation helps them separate and remove those distractions so they're not continually a problem. I will say that most of the time, I never have to go past this second consequence. If I even get this far, I rarely ever go past the second consequence. But if I do, this is the third one.
Third offense. You will be moved away from everyone, and your parents are told.
They will tell your parental people.
So you're moved away from everyone, and your parents are told. This is scary. The kids are scared to death. Usually it's like, hey, I'm going to talk to your mom about this. The kids are like, oot, and they're good for the rest of the day. Sometimes I don't even have to, I don't have to incite this. I don't have to, what's the word I'm looking for? I don't have to make this consequence happen. All I have to do is threaten that I'm going to talk to their parents, and then boom, the behavior's better. But sometimes you do have to move with this. And so let's go back into our situation of what I talked about with the last consequence. I've moved the kid away. I moved them away from their friends, so they're not there. But now they're hanging out with other kids, and they're continuing to distract them. Or they're just being loud and they're being disruptive. And I was like, okay, this is not working. So what we're going to do is we're going to remove you from everyone else. And I'm going to tell your parents. So in my other ministries, the room was much bigger than what I'm in now. And so it was deeper. And so I had actually a section of chairs away that weren't occupied by anyone kids. Basically what happens is they end up sitting by themselves. And sometimes even a leader or a small group leader will sit next to them that helps them like, hey, let's focus, let's be attentive of what's going on and try to like correct the problems before they become big. So I'm not having to correct them from the stage, or the leader who's presenting is not having to correct it from the stage. And then also having that conversation with the parent that when they leave, is like you go and is like, hey, we had some problems, and then you describe, here's the behavior, here are the actions I took. I wanted to let you know. And usually the parent is like, okay, thank you. I will have a conversation with them about this. And for the most part, they are taken with grace. Now, a little side point I didn't put in my blog post is that sometimes this consequence is enacted, and you as like the main children's pastor wasn't the one that was there. It was some other volunteer leader. That volunteer leader needs to tell you what happened. And even if that volunteer leader goes and tells the parent, you need to be around, because what's going to happen is if that volunteer leader goes and tells that parent and then ticks off that parent, makes that parent mad, then that parent then goes to the senior pastor and tells them what happened to their child in children's ministry. That senior pastor is not going to go to that leader. They're going to go to you. And so you need to know what happened, and you need to know what steps were taken, how to go through it. So and how you handled it. So I do allow other volunteer leaders to talk to parents, especially if they know what's going on. But I have I have spoken with the leader before they ever talk to the parent to make sure that I know what happened and that the consequences were handled accordingly and appropriately. And then I will allow them to have that conversation, just so we're all in the loop. Now, the fourth consequence is this.
Fourth offense. You will be removed from service and taken to a parent.
Bum, bum, bum. Don't do that.
You will be removed from service and taken to a parent. I can count on one hand how many times I've had to do this. This is so rare that I have to do that I have to do this where I've actually taken a kid and removed him completely from service. This is usually when the kid has been completely defiant. They have no desire to interact with the interact with the lesson that's happening. They are being a distraction or maybe even destructive of the environment and what's going on. And we just need to remove them from the place. This is even scarier than telling a kid, hey, I'm going to go tell your parents. It's like, I'm actually going to take you to your parent. So again, this, I've rarely ever had to enact this. I did do this one time at my first church. I had a kid that was he was being distracting and he was being disruptive, and I moved him and it didn't faze him at all. And so I took him to his parent. And then there were still continuing issues, and there's a lot of other things that I'm not going to go into here on this public video of what was going on, but it was still a conversation of talking with the parent. And so this just gives you that ultimate, like, this is the nuclear option of, hey, you're removing from the service. Now, I will say that if a fight breaks out in an actual physical fight, and I have seen it and we've seen it's going on, then those children are removed from the service immediately, because we do not accept fighting in here. And I'll talk more about, I may do a video later about policies and procedures and exactly what we do if some kind of physical fight breaks out, but it doesn't happen often. So those are my rules and consequences, but just having these rules and consequences is not good enough. What I've shown you this is the rules video that I use. When I first started out, I had the actual rules and consequences written out, laminated, posted on my stage. I've moved away from that because I want to talk about other things. I want other things to be emphasized in the children's ministry, not our rules and consequences. But what I do make is I have this video that you've seen, and I have several other ones that I do, and I run that before service every week so that the kids kids can hear it, they start to learn it. I make it funny so it's memorable, and then they will, and then it starts to create a culture. And this is what's different from being in a classroom, because if you read just a straight classroom management book, they talk about that you only need to go over your rules for like a week or two, up to a month when the kids first get together. But you have to do it every day. And that's because in a classroom setting, you have the same group of kids that meet every single day in the same room, and that there's not a lot of variability in there, and you're with them every day. But in children's church, we only have them like maybe one time a month, maybe twice a month. Sometimes they may even come all 4 times a month, but that may be 1 or 2 or 10 or 20, but it's not all the kids. You still have kids every single week. Hopefully you have new kids every single week coming in and joining your children's ministry. And so you have to remind them, here's what the rules, here's what's expected. So usually what I'll do is I'll play this video. If I feel like the culture is kind of falling apart, I'll play this video for several weeks in a row right before service begins. Like, okay, everybody sit down. And then, hey, here's the video. I even put a timer so that it helped me know, like, this is almost over, and help them know we're about to get ready for service. And so I'll do that for a month or 2. And then after that, I'll start lowering the frequency down to 2 weeks or every other week or once a month, just so the kids know and that culture is maintained. And if I feel like the kids are not following the rules a lot, we're having to put in a lot of consequences. Okay, so I'll start running the rules again, because that culture's starting to break down. And also, this is especially important during promotion week. Those of you who are just coming back into service from COVID, you got all new kids that are coming in there. And for me, my promotion weekend is going to be in June. So I'm going to run this every week, because I got all new kids. I got a whole new influx of new kids because they've just moved up from preschool into elementary. And I've had my best behaved kids that are now left. They've left 5th grade and gone to 6th grade. So you got to reestablish that culture. So run it all the way through. So you can watch the video. I put it right there in the card so you can see the whole video. And if you want to copy this video, just leave me a comment, shoot me an email, and I would be happy to share that with you. This is just me and a friend of mine. We got together. We did this in one take. And just ran through the rules and consequences. And I actually made this, I know it's poor quality because I made this like 12 years ago, but it still works, and it works super well for your kids. So it's so important to have a discipline plan with your church, within your children's ministry, because this is what creates a positive learning environment. Kids can't let the Holy Spirit work in them. They can't accept Jesus if there's chaos happening in the room. This discipline plan allows you to have order and control the kids, but also have a whole lot of fun within it. We still have fun in church. I'm not some strict disciplinarian. Sometimes I'm even too nice to them, but hey, it's all about these are the rules and consequences. So they know it's expected. And when they come in as expected, we are able to learn about God, learn about Jesus, and everyone is safe and happy as we go through. So I hope this certainly helps you. If it has, make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and get on notifications so you get more videos as we put those out. We'll see you next time.
So those are the rules and consequences.
Oui.
So choose wisely.
Oui.
See ya.
Oui. Bum, bum, bum. Don't do that.